A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
You know, Corn, this whole show runs on GPU compute, and we wouldn't be here without Modal.
Seriously. And that's what powers all our text-to-speech. Everything you're hearing right now.
They're an AI infrastructure platform. Developers use them to run GPU workloads in the cloud with zero infrastructure headaches.
If you're building anything with AI, check them out. Modal.com. Alright, so today's prompt from Daniel covers something that's unfortunately been a very real part of his life lately. The physics and timing behind missile interception debris. Why does it take so long after you hear that boom for it to actually be safe to leave a shelter? Herman Poppleberry. It's a critical question, and the answer is buried in some pretty wild orbital mechanics and fluid dynamics. The short version is that the boom is just the opening act. The main event, which is several tons of high-velocity shrapnel raining down, can take over a dozen minutes to finish. A dozen minutes. That feels counterintuitive. You hear this massive explosion overhead, it feels like the climax, and you think, okay, show's over. But it's not.
Right, and that instinct is exactly why the Homefront Command has had to extend the shelter-in-place guidance. The 10-minute rule was based on an older threat profile. What we're seeing now, with these Iranian ballistic launches, is a completely different ballgame in terms of altitude and velocity.
So, let's start with the basics that everyone misses. Where are these interceptions actually happening?
This is the first key piece. When we're talking about the long-range ballistic missiles Iran has been firing, the ones that get intercepted by the Arrow system, we're not talking about an explosion in the clouds. We're talking about an interception in what's essentially near space.
How high is near space?
For an Arrow 3 intercept, we're looking at altitudes between 50 and 100 kilometers, sometimes even higher. To put that in perspective, commercial airliners cruise at around 10 kilometers. The Kármán line, where space officially begins, is 100 kilometers, so we're intercepting these things practically in the vacuum of space.
Okay. And the missile itself is coming in from even higher than that?
These are ballistic missiles. They're launched on a parabolic arc, like throwing a rock. They go up, way up, and then come screaming back down. Their apogee, their highest point, can be over 100 kilometers. They're traveling at 2 to 3 kilometers per second on the way down. That's Mach 6 to Mach 9.
So the interception happens at the peak of that arc, or on the way down.
Ideally, you want to hit them as early as possible in their terminal phase, which is still extremely high up. Let's take a real example from just a few weeks ago in early March. An Iranian missile was intercepted at about 70 kilometers altitude. That's 70,000 meters straight up.
And when that interception happens, you get the boom. But that's not the debris hitting the ground.
Not even close. That boom is the kinetic kill vehicle, which is essentially a high-tech bullet, slamming into the warhead at a combined closing speed of maybe 4 or 5 kilometers per second. It's a hypervelocity impact. The energy released is catastrophic, vaporizing and fragmenting the missile into a cloud of debris. But here's the thing, that cloud is now 70 kilometers above the Earth, and it's not falling straight down.
It's still carrying all that forward momentum.
Precisely. The debris cloud inherits the velocity of the original missile, so it's not just dropping, it's still moving ballistically, but now as a spreading, tumbling cloud of fragments instead of a single projectile. Gravity pulls it down, but its horizontal velocity means it's going to travel a long, long way before it hits the ground.
So we need to do the math. How long does it take for something to fall from 70 kilometers?
If it were in a vacuum, falling straight down with no initial horizontal velocity, you could use simple kinematic equations. From 70 kilometers, it would take about 2 minutes to hit the ground. But that's not our scenario at all.
Because of air resistance.
Air resistance, fragmentation, and that huge horizontal velocity component. The lower it gets, the thicker the atmosphere becomes, and drag becomes the dominant force. Most of this debris isn't aerodynamic. It's jagged metal, chunks of fuselage, bits of the warhead if it wasn't fully neutralized. These pieces don't fall like streamlined bombs. They tumble, they flutter, they slow down dramatically.
So, what's the actual descent time?
From an intercept altitude of 70 kilometers, for the debris to completely clear and reach the ground, you're looking at 10 to 12 minutes, easily. For a higher intercept, say at 100 kilometers by Arrow 3, you can stretch that to 12 to 14 minutes. That's the time between hearing the distant thump of the interception and the last piece of shrapnel impacting somewhere.
And the somewhere is another huge part of this. It's not landing in a neat little pile.
Not even remotely. The debris cloud spreads. Think of it like a shotgun blast, but one fired from the edge of space. Depending on the intercept geometry and the forces involved, that cloud can disperse over a 10 to 20 kilometer radius. That's why the all clear isn't given for a specific neighborhood, it's given for a whole region. You might have heard the interception boom directly overhead, but a piece of debris from that same event could come down several towns away minutes later.
This explains the extended shelter warnings. It's not bureaucracy, it's literally waiting for the physics to play out.
It's entirely physics. The military has radar tracking the debris cloud as it descends and disperses. They're watching its velocity, its trajectory, modeling where it's likely to land. They don't give the all clear until that cloud has fully passed through the atmosphere and impacted. And they build in a safety margin because some pieces, especially lighter ones, can be caught in wind currents.
You mentioned the 10-minute rule being based on an older threat. What changed?
The threat changed. Dramatically. During conflicts with Gaza, the rockets are short-range, unguided, and have a much lower apogee. Iron Dome intercepts those within the atmosphere, often below 10 kilometers altitude. Debris from that kind of intercept falls to ground in a matter of a minute or two. The 10-minute rule was more than sufficient, and it accounted for the possibility of multiple salvos.
But now the primary threat, at least for these countrywide alerts, is a high-altitude ballistic missile from 1,000 kilometers away.
Right? And the interception altitude is an order of magnitude higher, so the debris fall time is an order of magnitude longer. The guidance had to evolve to match the new reality. It's not that the old rule was wrong, it's that the battlefield geometry shifted into the mesosphere.
Let's talk about the sound itself, the boom. Why do we even hear it? If it's happening at 70 kilometers up, shouldn't it be silent?
The sound you hear isn't the direct sound of the explosion. Sound waves can't travel through a near vacuum efficiently. What you're hearing is a different phenomenon altogether.
Go on. Go on.
When that hypervelocity impact occurs, it releases an enormous amount of energy almost instantaneously. This creates a powerful shock wave in the thin air at that altitude. That shock wave propagates downward through the increasingly dense atmosphere. But it's not like a thunderclap from a cloud. It gets distorted, stretched out. By the time it reaches the ground, it's often a low-frequency thump or a long rolling rumble that can last for several seconds. It's the atmosphere itself ringing like a bell after being struck.
So the boom is a delayed, distorted echo of an event that happened minutes ago, dozens of kilometers above us.
And psychologically, that makes it even more deceptive. You hear this dramatic, conclusive-sounding noise, and your brain wants to believe the event is over. But in reality, the most dangerous part, the unpredictable rain of high-speed metal, is still 80% of its journey to completion.
This also explains why sometimes you see flashes before you hear the sirens, or why the alert might come with almost no warning.
Operational security is part of that, but the physics is too. Detection happens at the launch point. Then you have flight time. A ballistic missile on a minimal energy trajectory from Iran might have a flight time of 12 to 15 minutes total. If the decision to alert a specific area is based on the missile's projected impact point, they might not sound the sirens until it's certain the trajectory is headed there. That can shave minutes off the warning.
Leaving people with maybe 5 minutes, or sometimes less, to get to shelter.
Unfortunately, yes. And if the interception occurs early in that terminal phase, you might get the alert, run to shelter, and then hear the boom 30 seconds later. But as we now know, that's your cue to stay put for the next 10 to 12 minutes minimum.
Let's get into the debris itself. What's actually falling? Is it just shredded metal, or is there more to it?
It's a mix, and the mix determines the danger. The kinetic kill vehicle is designed to destroy the missile through impact energy, not explosives. So you have the fragmentation of the missile body, aluminum alloys, titanium, steel components. You have the remains of the warhead, which could include high explosive material if it wasn't fully detonated on impact. Then you have the kill vehicle itself, which is also destroyed in the process. All of this is shattered into pieces ranging from dust-sized particles to chunks the size of a car door.
And the size determines how fast it falls.
It determines the terminal velocity. A small, dense piece might punch through the atmosphere and maintain a higher speed. A large, flat, tumbling piece will experience tremendous drag and slow down considerably. This is why the debris cloud spreads out not just geographically, but temporally. Different pieces land at different times over a span of several minutes.
Is there any pattern to where it lands, or is it just completely random within that 20-kilometer radius?
It's not perfectly random, but it's highly unpredictable. The initial dispersal from the impact gives the cloud a vector, but as pieces encounter different atmospheric densities and winds, their paths diverge. The larger the initial altitude, the greater the potential dispersion. It's a chaotic system. This is why the instruction is universal. If you heard the sirens for your area, stay under cover until the official all clear, even if you heard a boom 10 minutes ago. A piece could still be on its way down to your street.
Can you give us a sense of the scale of these debris fields? How much material are we actually talking about raining down?
Sure. Let's take a hypothetical medium-range ballistic missile. The missile itself might weigh 5 to 8 metric tons at launch. A significant portion of that is fuel, which would have been burned off, but you're still looking at perhaps 1 to 2 tons of solid structure and warhead. When that's violently fragmented at hypersonic speeds, you get thousands of individual pieces. Some will be small and burn up, but many will survive re-entry. So you have a literal ton of high-velocity shrapnel distributed over an area that could be larger than a major city.
That's a staggering mental image. A ton of shrapnel spread over a metropolitan area, arriving piecemeal over 10 minutes.
And that's for a single missile. In a salvo scenario, with multiple interceptions, the debris fields can overlap and compound the danger period significantly.
This brings us to the human cost of misunderstanding the physics. There have been incidents, haven't there?
There have. Last April, there was an interception over central Israel. People heard the loud boom, waited what they thought was a reasonable amount of time, and left their shelters. Several minutes later, a large piece of debris came through the roof of a residential building in a town well away from the perceived intercept point. It caused significant damage and, tragically, there were casualties. The official all clear had not been given. The investigation showed the debris had been part of the same cloud, just a fragment that took a different, slower path down.
That's horrifying, but it perfectly illustrates the point. The system isn't being overly cautious, it's responding to a physical reality that is inherently delayed and dispersed.
And this reality is shaped by the weapons being used. Iran has been leaning heavily on these ballistic missiles precisely because they're harder to intercept and because, even when intercepted, the debris problem creates a secondary area denial effect. It forces populations to stay under cover for extended periods, disrupting life, creating anxiety, and tying up emergency services.
It's a psychological weapon as much as a physical one.
The uncertainty, the prolonged stress of waiting for an all clear that doesn't come, the sound of the boom that tricks you into thinking the danger has passed, it all compounds the terror. Understanding the physics behind it, as Daniel's prompt asks us to do, is a way to reclaim some of that mental ground. It replaces mystery with mechanics, and anxiety with understanding.
So let's talk about the other system you mentioned, Iron Dome. Its physics are different, right?
Completely different. Iron Dome is designed for lower-tier threats, rockets, artillery, mortars. Their intercepts happen within the atmosphere, usually between 5 and 10 kilometers altitude. The Tamir interceptor missile has a proximity-fused warhead that explodes, sending a focused pattern of pellets into the path of the incoming rocket.
So the debris from that is falling from a much lower height.
Much lower, and because the interception is explosive, the debris is often smaller and more combusted. The fall time is on the order of 1 to 2 minutes. The 10-minute rule was always more than enough for Iron Dome intercepts. The confusion arises now because both systems are being used simultaneously. You might have Iron Dome dealing with a short-range threat from the north while Arrow is engaging ballistic missiles from the east. The public hears booms and sirens and doesn't necessarily know which system is at work, so the safe, universal protocol has to be based on the worst-case scenario, the high-altitude intercept.
That's a crucial point of confusion. How is someone supposed to know, in the moment, which kind of intercept just happened overhead?
They aren't, and they shouldn't try. That's the key. The only safe assumption is that any boom could be from a high-altitude intercept. The sound itself isn't a reliable indicator. A lower altitude Iron Dome intercept can also produce a loud bang. The only thing that matters is the official guidance. The Homefront Command knows which system was engaged and the altitude of the intercept. Their all clear is based on that data.
What about future developments? Is there any way to reduce this debris fall time? Different interception methods?
That's the million-dollar question. Some research is looking at what are called hit-to-kill enhancements for lower-tier systems, but for exoatmospheric kills, the physics is pretty fixed. If you intercept at 100 kilometers, you have a 100-kilometer fall to account for. One concept is using directed energy lasers to thermally disable a missile earlier in flight, causing it to break up without a high-energy kinetic impact. That could potentially result in a less violent fragmentation and maybe a more predictable debris field, but you'd still have the fall time from altitude.
Lasers sound like science fiction, but I know they're being tested.
They're moving out of the lab and into field tests. But the power requirements and atmospheric distortion issues for exoatmospheric engagement are immense. For now, and for the foreseeable future, kinetic interception at high altitude is the only proven technology for ballistic missiles, and that comes with this built-in debris delay. The focus has to be on better public understanding and adherence to the safety protocols that are based on this reality.
Speaking of other technologies, what about intercepting the missile earlier, during its boost phase? Wouldn't that solve the debris overpopulated areas problem?
In theory, absolutely. A boost phase intercept, where you hit the missile right after launch while it's still climbing and over the launch territory, is the holy grail for this very reason. The debris, and any unexploded warhead, falls on the aggressor's turf. The problem is practical. To do that, you need an interceptor platform very close to the launch site, like a fighter jet with a special missile, or a drone with a laser. For a country like Iran, that's a huge logistical and political challenge. It's being worked on, but it's not an operational reality yet.
So, the practical takeaways are pretty straightforward, but they're born from this incredibly complex set of physics.
They are. First, the boom is the beginning of the danger period, not the end. Second, the official all clear is not a suggestion, it's the result of a radar-tracked, physics-based calculation. And third, sharing this understanding that it's not capricious, it's celestial mechanics, can literally save lives by preventing people from leaving shelter too soon.
It turns a scary mystery into a predictable, if unfortunate, equation.
And in a situation where control is limited, understanding provides a different kind of security. There's a weird historical analogy here, you know. During the Blitz in London, people learned the different sounds of bomber engines, the whistle of different falling bombs. That knowledge, that physics, gave them a sliver of predictability. This is a modern, high-tech version of the same thing, understanding the timeline of the threat.
That's a powerful comparison. Knowledge is a form of defense in itself. Well, I think that covers the crazy physics Daniel was asking for. Thanks as always to our producer, Hilbert Flumingtop. And big thanks to Modal for providing the GPU credits that power this show.
If you're enjoying these deep dives, a quick review on your podcast app helps us reach new listeners. And if you have a prompt that turns everyday anxiety into a physics lesson, send it our way.
This has been My Weird Prompts. Stay safe.
See you next time.
This episode was produced using DeepSeek v3.2. Text-to-speech by Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, My Weird Prompts, where our thoughts go from slow takes to facts on cue. We change and follow through. My Weird Prompts, that's the close from sloth.